You mentioned Trump, and he's quite, transactional in his approach to things. It's more of what's in it for America compared to just giving you aid. If it does, it does have to benefit America as well. And Europe seems so far from Africa in terms of development and economy. It almost doesn't know how to relate to, Africa anymore. And China seems to be filling up that position. Are we going to see that drastically improve, even now that you have Trump, coming on board, that China and Russia would occupy more of that position in Africa than you've had the West?
China stands a better advantage of harnessing the opportunities that the chaotic diplomatic environment will present. China more. And the reason why China stands a better advantage, stands at a very, very advantageous point is because China has a track record of ingratiating itself as a trading partner, as an infrastructure provider,
and not a moral watchdog, as America would.
And because they don't have any ideological qualms about how you run your country, they'll tell you they're not interested in issues like respect for the rule of law, human rights, corruption. It's none of their business. They're coming with an agenda, and the agenda is what instructs what they do. They are not involved in any of these other paraphernalia of governance or quality of human life, your human rights records. So I want to believe that China would ultimately, from 2025, gain a degree of traction that will put it at a seemingly advantageous position relative to the United States of America and Europe. Look, Europe is going through a mess that they caused historically for themselves. Look at the situation of France. France, for centuries, indeed, after flag and anthem independence, for decades, overexploited the Francophone countries. Now, as a result of a mixture of opportunism, a mixture of revulsion, opportunism, and France is literally being kicked out of those countries. Literally being kicked out. In fact, a couple of days ago, the last French battalion, or the last French military presence in one of these countries was practically kicked out. So, and the same thing is happening to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, because of its arrogance and conceit of superiority relative to even other Europeans, they got themselves out of Europe. They are now in a situation where they know that the economy is shrinking because of that act of arrogance. But you know what? Even if politically it's going to be difficult for anybody to take them back, the present government, Keir Starmer's government, wants to at least a rapprochement of a sort, but that rapprochement could only go far because there are some in the EU who are determined that the UK must be flagellated, well scorched for what it has done, so that it does not serve as a precedent for some other members to want to leave. And some of them are getting vindicated now because, it is obvious now that the UK economy is shrinking. So I'm sitting there now thinking, ironically, it will ostensibly seem initially that the activities of Donald Trump may mess up China's commercial strategy. But I see a China that is already building bridges with the alternative markets. Nigeria, look at our trade record with China.
You add to that is Belt and Road Initiative. But a lot of people will say, look, they got it right with that initiative, and that's where America is struggling to meet up. They've started Prosper Africa. They've started, I think, AGOA has always been there. Under Trump, there was Prosper Africa, and then Biden did follow through. Now they are building the Lobito corridor, in Africa as well, almost like trying to catch up with what China is doing. But is there also a sense that we relate with China, whether it's historically, and when you look at how both economies were, China has moved far up, but how we all started. And then in terms of population as well, we have really, and I'm talking about Africa and China. So is there a sense where we also relate more, with a kind of developmental model than, any other country?
You see, your question, as intelligent as your question is speaking to certain sentiments within the Nigerian intelligentsia. And we must be very careful not to run headlong with the likely disillusionment that sentiment will throw at us. China is in this for no reason of sentiment. They just want a situation where they profit from Africa. Anybody listening to me now, I would rather as Gbola and shake China on infrastructure. Let me give you a practical example. I don't even want to speak to the macro. Let me speak to the micro from my viewpoint. I started a building and construction training school about 10 years ago. And when I was convincing the Nigerians in the diaspora, when I was trying to convince them that any state-of-the-art equipment that we would need in that training school, that I was ready to get, some of them were disillusioned. Gbola is not going to be easy. We need total station, and total station is going to be costing around $20,000. And I was looking at them and I was laughing, because by then I had known that for every state-of-the-art equipment, just like a popular phone that most of you people carry, Unicorn 16, something 17, or something 10, you will get an equivalent in China that does just about everything that phone does, for as low as 15 to 20% of the market value of this. So when I was telling my partners, the technical partners with whom I wanted to start the training school, they were telling me, Gbola, we need this equipment, and they listed the equipment, and the total price they gave or projected was around 180 to 200,000 US. My sister, we got everything for less than 36,000 US. You know why? Because I have a friend who they never knew then. Eventually, I made him a member of the board of directors of the training institute, which is still existing. I made him and you know what? He has an office in Shenzhen. And for every equipment that my friends who had functioned in England, who had functioned in the United States of America, who were functioning in Dubai, were thinking that the West was the author, I had known years before, as a result of my journalistic listening, I had known years before that the brand owners, we call it gold plating. The brand owners will go like that famous telephone company, will go to China to go and do the hardware. They will have the software in the West and put a brand to it. And you buy it about 15 times more than what ordinarily they made it for them in China. So I'm sitting here now that is the way we Nigerians and Africans, those of us in leadership in Nigeria and in Africa, and I'm not talking about those who are in political leadership alone, even those of us who are in sectorial leadership. That is the way we must be playing China against the West and the West against China.
I want to get to the point you just raised in just a moment, because it's very important to talk about how China is the manufacturing hub of the world and what that means for us, because we seem to be, everything is left for China to produce and manufacture and then distribute to the rest of the world. But I wanted to ask you, because I heard, I think it was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, talking about now we're coming to Nigeria, how our partnership with China have moved from the strategic partnership to the comprehensive strategic partnership, which means that we are now engaging with China on a level higher across more fields and sectors. Does that mean, in terms of, when you look at that, how do we benefit? Because sometimes, and I always use this, it seems very, this, I don't know if you know Johnny Bravo, he's big at the top and very tiny at the bottom. And I always say sometimes some of these agreements, a Johnny Bravo agreement where it's big at the top, which means that the West and the East seem to take more benefits. Then Africa, takes the very, little benefit at the bottom. But how do we ensure that we are benefiting from some of these agreements, on equal grounds? at least almost on equal grounds from some of these agreements?
That is a function, that is going to be a function of the intellectual robustness of our leadership, visioning, and strategy. Look, life is, many watching this program now may not like the way I put it, but let me be very practical with my viewers. Life is about human beings taking advantage of human beings. You know, as a young boy, when I first read the passage in the Bible that God will take from those who do not have to give to those who have, I was shocked. There were some things as a boy growing up, when I came across in some, even in scriptures, I was shocked. But that's the truth of life. China is in this for what is China gaining. Nigeria should approach it. Let me give you a simple example. About 80 to 90% of what Nigeria makes from China now is the oil they buy from Nigeria. And yet China is the manufacturing this of the world. And they need so many of the raw materials that we have in Nigeria. So many. And you see, this kind of agreement should be leveraged to say, China, you know what? We will let you have these raw materials, but to a minimally processed rate. Whenever you add value to anything, you get far more than when you ship out raw. Those should be our strategy.